Hello, one and all. It is Professor Hamamoto, and the date is March 16, year 2025. The time, 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Welcome, one and all, for an exciting talk that I'm going to be giving titled Children's TV and Corporate Myth Making. Now, I had to give it a bland title because in all honesty, this topic goes much deeper and it's much more horrific in its implications. And I wanted this tube view to stay up and not be taken down peremptorily, right? I wanted people to see this. And it's going to be a challenge to try to work through a lot of the material that I've gathered in preparation for this talk. And all this is to say that once again, I have to keep warning people, especially those who are new to the channel, that don't try to understand this material too quickly. Just because I flashed the name up there, Jeanette McCurdy, and her best-selling book, I'm Glad My Mom Died. Can you see it? It's available. It's still in print. You can get it at your favorite bookseller. I'll put a link on it later in the description below, or you can find it on my X account. Don't try to understand this material too quickly, even though you might have, which is to your benefit, really, for the purposes of this discussion. The long-term benefits, there are none, which is really the gist of this talk here. But just because you grew up on Nickelodeon channel programs, not just iCarly or the spinoffs, does not give you any additional insight into what's really going on beneath the text, beneath the performance. And as good as Jeanette McCurdy is in retelling her story of her career and the experiential aspects of her celebrityhood, and I often talk about celebrity. In fact, I was premature in this, perhaps, but just to show you how far academia has progressed or maybe regressed, there's a new journal, I think I've mentioned it before, called Celebrity Studies. It's called the Journal of Celebrity Studies. It's a genuine academic research organ, and it's published by Routledge, an academic publisher. And I think just for fun, I'm going to post this on my Patreon for those of you who want to dig a little bit deeper into what the academic community has to say about programs like iCarly or Nickelodeon in general. We're going to get to that in a moment. In addition, if you have a child or a grandchild in college or junior college or high school, upper levels perhaps, you might want to have, and they're probably exposed to Nickelodeon, say, hey, if you're looking for a project, a term paper, research project, hey, there's some literature I can share with you. Get the whole family involved in this effort to decolonize our minds, right? It can be done, and it can be seen in the person of Jeanette McCurdy herself. I'm sure it's still a struggle for her, but from what I've seen of her in her own appearances, not the ones that are narrated or curated for us by these celebrity YouTube channels, but in her own words, it seems like she's managed to work through her early problems that started in childhood, as early as age 6, when she first started acting professionally. Talk about pressure. And she was, as most of you who read the book, was probably the principal income earner for her family, who lived in, when you hear Orange County, the Real Housewives of Orange County, you might think Orange County is all Newport Beach or Laguna. or Irvine Hills or something like that. But I grew up in Orange County for several years, and I will attest to the fact that where she grew up is known as the armpit of Orange County. It's called Garden Grove. What a misnomer, Garden Grove. And she herself self-mockingly refers to it as Garbage Grove. And this is in West Orange County. I grew up in the Anaheim area. Before that, I lived in the ghetto and in Los Angeles. So I understand where she's coming from so far as her class position is concerned, and so far as her family. I mean, her dad worked at Home Depot. Not to put that down, he was a hardworking guy. All right, that's not the point I'm trying to make here. He was not able to support the family on a Home Depot wage. And I think he had a couple other jobs as well. He had a grandfather living there as well. He was kind of a wise old man, but he wasn't really bringing much into the household so far as money's concerned. Maybe he was on Social Security or he had a modest pension, something like that. She didn't go into it. I'm just speculating. And a grandmother who was really a nasty piece of work. I don't think she worked as well. So it was really on Jeanette McCurdy at a very early stage in life who was responsible for bringing the money to the household, number one, and secondly, to fulfill the ambitions of her mother. And we've all heard about the stage mother, but if you multiply the stage mother times 100, then you will understand a little bit about the psychology of the woman that put Jeanette McCurdy in front of the camera, figuratively and literally. So you can read yourself. It's a recurring, it's an underlying, not even underlying, it's a continual theme throughout the entire book. Hence the ironic title, I'm Glad My Mom Died. And it's meant to be ironic. She wasn't, really glad that she suffered because her mother was going through the cancer process, terminal, stage 4. And it's always there, not on underlying, but on the surface of it. Her mother would suggest that Jeanette, her daughter, mention it to producers or casting directors in order to elicit sympathy to give her a leg up in a very competitive field, right? There's tons of cute children who are vying for the same limited roles in television, film, and now other media. In this case, it happened, her breakthrough was the Nickelodeon channel, which I'll talk about right now, because I think it is important to understand the historical origins, the institutional construction or makeup of these abstract entities, right? You hear Nickelodeon and it's just said, oh, okay, yeah, we know SpongeBob, blah, blah. So you think you have it down. You don't. Hence, I'm going to walk you through this. I'll spend not very much time on it because in other talks I have dealt with Hollywood as an institution. And by the way, before I go on for the newbies, I want to tell you, I studied this from an academic from a scholarly standpoint, right? I'm not just some gossip monger on TubeView who knows this is going to get him or her clicks or views. That would be nice, by the way. Why don't you subscribe to the channel? Because I'm suppressed here. I'm not buying any views here. And plus, when we get into the talk, you'll realize that this is not simple Hollywood gossip that's being fed to you on TubeView. All right. So we've gotten that out of the way. In previous talks, I've reviewed this book called Moguls. It's relatively new. It's published just a year or two ago. Moguls, the lives and times of Hollywood film pioneers. Specifically, they focus on the Schenck brothers. It's spelled Schenck. It's pronounced Skank. Nicholas and Joseph. And the subtitle is Power, Scandal, Mob, as in Mafia, Maryland, as in Monroe, and more. Right. The book is decent. This guy has done his basic homework on it, but doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty of what Paramount represents. Paramount Network was always about putting bodies out there. In their case, it was mostly adult bodies, chorus girls. They used to be called showgirls. You can still see them in Las Vegas or in Atlantic City or maybe in Branson, Missouri. I don't know. I haven't been to the New South type of gambling and entertainment complex. I'd like to go to check it out. I haven't been to Macau either. I don't know what it's like, but I have been to Las Vegas and some of the other casinos. Some of the Indian casinos are not big on showgirls. It's mostly second tier acts or first tier acts that are on the way down. And there's no showgirls. But anyway, that was Paramount. They were called the Paramount Beauties. And Paramount was involved, Paramount Studio, it was involved in an antitrust suit. I think it was a major decision. It's called the Paramount decision, appropriately enough. I think it was passed in 1948. And for the nitpickers who want to fact check me, you can correct me if I'm wrong. That's okay. You're missing the point if you're sitting here waiting for me to slip up so far as facts are concerned. Right. So just listen, and then you can Google the stuff later. It's really not central to the argument here, which is these networks of power from Paramount of old, right? In the early days of the Moguls, they were almost 100% Jewish immigrants, by the way, right? Now it's their grandchildren or great-grandchildren who are the lawyers and the executives and the accountants and the vice presidents and the network people who run the show, right? It's an ethnic enterprise then. It's an ethnic enterprise now. And I mention that as if you are not of that particular group, your best bet is to get money from China, or I'm speaking as a yellow person, or from Japan, because they both invest heavily in America and hit them up for money to produce content for yellow people around the world, not just America, but all over the world. There's a Chinese diaspora, there's an Indian diaspora, and to a lesser extent, there's a Japanese diaspora, there's a Vietnamese diaspora. They're all over the place. But the people who live in the ironically titled Pacific Palisades don't know what's going on in the Pacific. They're looking the other direction. And they are the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren of the people, the Moguls, who started the business. So they own it. Stop complaining. Stop whining about it. Stop using certain racially tinged rhetoric and saying how they own this, that, and the other. Start your own business. Right? If I go to a Japanese restaurant, I want to make sure it's Japanese people who are running it, because you know the food's going to be of a certain level. That's part of their culture. That's part of their food culture. And I don't need no Anthony Bourdain, the intelligence asset. I've given a talk on this to tell me to appreciate certain types of cuisines that I was reared on. Reared as in raised, not reared as in sodomized, which we'll get into in a moment. So I look at the business license when I go into a Japanese restaurant, even if it's Korean or Taiwanese name. I'm out of there. I might eat there, but I know it's not the real thing, because the food in American society and culture, especially its humor, is Yiddish at bottom. That's not me saying that. I mean, I've observed this because I grew up in that milieu. I'm a third generation American. All right. I'm saying this because we still live in a country, a society where people want to orientalize the yellow people. All right. That's all I'm going to say about that, because people get angry because they think that they've gone beyond race. At least they've been told by right-wing media. Stop talking about that. Well, I'm not going to talk about it because that's still my reality. All right. So Janet McCurdy is a wholesome, all-American girl. This is what the producers were looking for, and she cultivated that image throughout her acting career, which spanned about 18 years, maybe a little bit longer. By the way, she was approached to do a reboot, not a reboot, but a revisit of iCarly, and she turned it down for the reasons that she spells out in the book. So she's for real when she's writing these words here. She's not BSing us, because we read a lot of these books about recovery and about how men or women or child stars are subjected to this, that, and the other, but they don't change their behavior. They try to garner sympathy for us, but have they changed? Have they charted a new direction for themselves? No. In fact, oftentimes they reproduce what they are condemning. So from the get-go, I give a lot of credit to Jeanette McCurdy as someone with integrity. And she's primarily, I would consider her a writer. She speaks her own words now. She doesn't have scripted dialogue. She is herself, which seems to me is what she wanted to be from the very beginning. But the mother, the producers, this guy known as the creator in the book, and I assume that Jeanette McCurdy put down there the creator because of non-disclosure agreements, or even though she turned down $300,000 offered by Nickelodeon to shut her up about all the shenanigans going on the set. But they wanted to sign an NDL. NDA. Non-disclosure. I should know. I signed an NDA with the University of California. They made me sign an NDA. Right. And we'll see if they're able to enforce that NDA. There's ways around it, legally and on the outskirts of legality. Right. And McCurdy manages to skirt that edict by calling him the creator. But I'm just purely speculating because she probably wants to avoid being sued, right? But I'm not afraid of being sued, and I'm just going by what is publicly known on TubeU by all the gossip mongers. And it's a guy named Dan Schneider. He is the creator of the show, after all. And I'll share a little bit of, most of you know who this miscreant is. He's a bloated bully who, if you saw in the supermarket, you go, wow, my radar is telling me that this guy is here in the store looking for children. Right. But the stage mothers, the people who are involved in the industry, they're all complicit to varying degrees. Will overlook such behavior because their jobs, their careers, their residuals, their income, their careers depend upon looking the other way. Now, is that ever going to change? No. Realistically, no. Can we, the audience, change individually? Yes. That is a definite yes. I've already told you that Jeanette McCurdy herself, who was put through this mill, through the ringer emotionally and professionally, she is recovered or on the way to recovery. And she's not the only case. In a previous talk, I alluded to Kathy O'Brien. She's a person who most of us here in the chat know about. If not, check out her books. She's written at least, well, she's written 3 now. And the third book, which I found really gratifying, is talking about how she managed to escape this early childhood, young adulthood grooming process where she was caught into this network of, to put it lightly, unseemly scenarios dominated by men and to a certain extent women of power, of great power, not just in entertainment, politically, financial world, sports, you name it. You're familiar with her story, Kathy O'Brien, but she prevails over that. In the third volume, I don't know if it's number 3, but the final book that she wrote, the most recent book that I'm aware of, read that one. So it is possible. Now, I also want to stress the fact, when I was reading this book, Jeanette McCurdy, because this is something I've talked about frequently on my channel over the past 4 years. I'm on year 5 now. Subscribe to this channel. I want to get to the 100,000 mark for TubeView so I can get my little plaque with the play arrow on it. Right. But I often, in the previous 4 years, go in on so-called psychotherapy. So I'm reading here in the book where Jeanette McCurdy, I'll refer to her as McCurdy, meaning her, not her mother or dad. I don't want to call her Jeanette. I'm not on a first name basis with her. And I didn't watch the show because I was aged out of kiddies television. Right. And that's a mistake. If you are a parent, you need, or someone with children of this age who is watching Nickelodeon, you need to be sitting there on the couch or on the floor watching it with your children as a supervision. Would you let them out in the public park by themselves? Not these days. Maybe when I was growing up, you can walk about anywhere as a child or bicycle until it turns dark, and there weren't going to be molesters abducting you or kidnapping you, right? But today you're going to have to be extra vigilant, because not only are the stereotypical evil men, the strangers who are dangers, not only are they lurking around there, but you have these people who are in institutions like Nickelodeon who are involved in this, and they get a pass because of the institutional clout and the normalization of their power in our society. So we have to take a moment, set aside the institutional infrastructure here. We'll call it Nickelodeon. It involves all of legacy media, and it also includes a lot of the pop-up pundits on so-called indie media that you see on YouTube. Why are my subscription numbers so low after 4 years of regular production? People know where I am, at least the regular viewers of this channel, because I'm not fitting the agenda that TubeView wants to put across. When I say TubeView, it's the people who are above that. These are the policymakers, the depth psychologists who work in tandem with the Federal Communications Commission. Remember I told you I have an academic, a scholarly background in this? That's how I know about these institutions, the FCC. You have to start talking about that. You can't stay at the level of these gossip queens when talking about iCarly or Jeanette McCurdy. And she's not responsible for it, but she can't cover it in her book. Either she doesn't know about it, but that's not the thrust of the book. She's talking about the experience of being subjugated and being exploited. And here's one of the key ironies of it: being exploited by other females who happen to be adult. Because most of you who know a little bit about the Nickelodeon Group will understand that it's female dominated. They were DEI way in advance, before it was mandated by these corporations. Is it because these policymakers like women or cherish them or respect them? No, it's so that they can better control them under the guise of caring, benevolence, equity, right? Inclusion. These are all the soft and fuzzy little terms that we can all embrace in order to screw over women even more so and get them to like it. There's such a sadomasochistic thrust in all of this. For the adults involved, like your Dan Schneiders, and in the case of another network, Joss Whedon, who was the showrunner, that's the term for the producer, usually the creator of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And a lot of this, by the way, is being pushed by women in gender studies and the university as well. So you have a bunch of institutions who are working together in order to further dominate and subjugate children and women. Ironically, in a post-feminist world, supposedly there are more, we know for a fact that there are more women in America, at least in college and university, than there are men. And the level of social professional equality is not 50-50 at this point, but it's moving in that direction. Thanks to first wave feminism, which wanted equity, which wanted equality. I think all of us can accept that. But when it became weaponized and became the DEI, third wave feminism or third plus feminism, then we know it's been hijacked and taken over and theorized by a lot of people who are in the academic world. And again, I will stress the fact that that's my world as well. That's why I can speak with it on this topic with authority. I have standing in the profession. And I know you're not used to seeing a yellow man toot his own horn in American society, right? But I've had to learn to do that because that's the way the world works. You don't get a job in the academic world or any world selling insurance on Wall Street if you are a shrinking violet. If you are a yellow person, what you will do is go to one of those jobs where you're sitting in front of a monitor all the time, writing code for Sam Altman of ChatGPT, or you be working for Jeff Bezos. It's the rare individual like Stephen Chen who invented YouTube. Peace out, Stephen Chen. I want you to invest in my all yellow network. It's called Yen TV, right? It's all going to be yellow dominated. We're going to have our own professional sports league, right? Professional badminton, the National Badminton Association. Stephen Chen, hit me up and we'll do some business, all right? So that's how it works. You got to be a mensch. You got to be a macher. You have to understand the joys of Yiddish. But let me finish my thought about my contributions to the academic world. It allows me to suss out, I guess you can't see it, there's too much light. It allows me to suss out little articles such as this one by a woman named Sarah Bennett Weiser. She's a hyphenate, or Weiser. And it was published in Critical Studies in Media Communication. I know that journal. I subscribe to it. I'm a professional. Just like in Ghostbusters, don't mess with it. I'm a professional. And most of it's left wing, most of it's today by now, most of it's leftist, pseudo-feminist tripe in the guise of academic research. And this is one of them by Sarah Bennett Weiser. It's called Girls Rule! Exclamation point. Subtitle, Gender, Feminism, and Nickelodeon. Well, isn't that the The topic of the day, Nickelodeon. And guess where her affiliation is? She's an assistant professor at the Annenberg School of Communication at the University of Southern California. Hey, USC, isn't that where John M. Chu went to school? Yeah, they vetted him to make sure that he would put a lot of queer yellows in his movies, whether it's Crazy Rich Asians or put a bunch of queers in Wicked and put some black people in the cast there where there was none in the original. Just like Sleeping Beauty, or Snow White, rather. Snow White is now Snow Brown. They found a Jewish Latina, sort of like AOC, Alexandrix, or Tassiox, Cortex. She's a Latinx, right? They put her on Snow Brown, Snow White. And the public, it's a Disney product, of course, is already walking away from it, and the movie hasn't even dropped yet. Can you dig it? Yes, we can change individually and as an audience. I don't like to think of us as an audience. That's a collectivity. That's like a bunch of sheeple. We are individuals. We're society. We're cohesive. We're gaining our legs back as Americans and as people around the world. So Snow Brown is going to come out flat. It's so, from what I'm reading and seeing, Disney has so little confidence that that movie is going to do anything. They're not even putting it in their own marquee theaters. And the theatrical release has been way scaled down because they don't want to embarrass themselves. That's Snow White, by the way, Snow Brown, right? I'm just giving you these examples for the people out there who watch a lot of demoralizing tube, but oh yeah, we got RFK's not going to do anything. Oh yeah, Pam Bondi, blah blah blah. You've got a losing mentality. If you're not getting the results you want and you need and you require, then why don't you do something about it? Why don't you help exert pressure on these characters so that they'll do their job? It can be done, and it is moving in that direction, I will say. And I've been saying this for years, not just on this channel, I've been saying it for all of my professional career. And I was just disgusted when I'd hear some prematurely wise 19-year-old tell me how nothing's ever going to change. I said, how the hell do you know? You haven't begun to be tested yet. So just shut up and listen in the classroom. Listen to what I have to say, because I'm going to prepare you for the cruel realities of the world you are about to face. And with the exception of a few wise asses, who I usually dealt with quite harshly. I learned this, by the way, by going to comedy shows and seeing how performers dealt with hecklers. There was always some drunk-ass guy who was trying to impress his girlfriend, who was trying to put the spotlight on him. So I observed how you deal with these fame-grabbing drunkards, because I had them in my classes too. And I started getting the ones with the piercings and the tattoos and the dyed hair, the ones who were third wave feminists who were being sent over to my classrooms by so-called women's and gender studies, by this one woman who was in my department named Wendy Ho, trying to gangbang me. Oh, it was just so good. Body slamming them, so to speak. For the time they left the class, they were humiliated. And I didn't have to do anything. I just said, okay, here's the microphone. You tell us everything we need to know about third wave feminism. Tell us everything you learned in so-called women and gender studies on how you're going to smash the heteropatriarchy by supporting Nickelodeon, and watch the grooming of little girls and teeners like Ariana Grande. In addition to Jeanette McCurdy, they were paired up, right? And that was intentional. The conflict that was being created and massaged on the set was meant to be a public demonstration of how women cannot get along with each other. They're always going to be catfighting. So in a show in a network, there's supposed to be empowerment of feminism, according to Sarah Banet Weiser, who teaches at the Annenberg School of Communication, which I had a relationship with via the guy who ran this program, Larry Gross. His job was to queer television and movies. He was from the other Annenberg at the University of Pennsylvania. They sent him out to the Annenberg in LA so he can be by Hollywood and put pressure on the producers and the showrunners and the writers to turn everything queer. And they brought me in as a consultant to bring yellow people into queerdom. But I refused to do it, so I didn't get invited back. And there's all these allied institutions, in addition to Annenberg School of Communication, that are involved in this process. It's a huge institutional effort. So informants like myself are invaluable in helping us break free of this bondage. I found out that the Kaiser Family Foundation, based in Oakland, I believe, right? They're the big insurance and the hospital people, medical care. I'm sure they're very much involved in gender affirming healthcare. Their reps were there at these seminars related to Annenberg, UCLA, School of Cinema, and all that, where I taught for a whole year in order to push this particular agenda that was going to be dramatized on shows like iCarly. I'm just using that as, there's tons of other shows on Nickelodeon and other networks, CW, Warner, Fox, all of them. They're all running off the same general globalist NATO United Nations script. And above that, of course, as I mentioned before in other talks, it's a Luciferian agenda. Right? You don't associate necessarily Hollywood or Los Angeles with Freemasonry, but it's a Freemason stronghold. And most of the big names here in Hollywood were all members of the lodge. Do you understand that? All of them. Did the general public know that? No, it just started leaking through with the conspiracy literature, which, thank goodness, now a lot of academics are taking this conspiracy theory. They're taking it seriously. We'll get to one in a moment. So that's your Annenberg School of Communication. Many of you know from my previous talks who Mo Annenberg was, Moses Annenberg. He was a mafia dude. I think he was affiliated with Chicago people, probably Detroit too, Purple Gang. And they migrated to Hollywood. You know that story about the mafia. All the books are out by now. I interviewed Ori Spotto a few weeks ago already. It's called The Accidental Gangster. The whole city's full of fixers and deal makers and facilitators, let's say. That's how it's run. They put pressure on you. You're disposed of if you're expendable. If things, you'll get the Bugsy Siegel treatment if necessary, right? This is the real world we're talking about, right? This is not the classroom. This is what I tried to bring into my pedagogy. So anyway, Annenberg was mafia. We've heard enough about that. His father, they laundered the reputation. His son, eventually, Walter J. Annenberg, became the ambassador to the court of St. James's. He got the number one ambassadorial post down in Palm Springs, Palm Desert, where all the rat packers live too. Kennedys like to go down and hang out. Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra, you know the story there. That's Walter J. Annenberg. He was involved with the Daily Racing Forum. He was involved in gambling, you name it. This is how you come up. And all the yellow gangsters out there, this is how we are going to build the NTV. But we're going to stay out of jail at the same time. We're going to follow Stephen Chen, the founder of TubeU. We're going to follow his trajectory. He was studying computer science at the University of Illinois and then was recruited by PayPal, the PayPal mafia. But the PayPal mafia didn't want to pay the Chinaman the fair wage. He was coming up with all the great ideas, doing all the code and staring at the screen all day. And the PayPal mafia were taking all the money off of it, making their companies go public. But Stephen Chen said, I'm going to start my own business. Later on, he sold YouTube to Gmail or PayPal. They're all the same now, right? This institutional is important. And as you know, I like to emphasize the role of the coolies in building the new information highway, the railroad, right? Who's making Elon Musk rich? These are the yellow coolies. Not just yellow, they're also brown. Many of them are Indians, so we have to include that. They call them Asian. I'll just call them yellow. All right, so here's Jeanette McCurdy. For those of you who are still scratching your head, you were too old to watch children's television, and you're watching reruns of Leave It to Beaver, which was one of her grandmother's favorite shows, by the way. Her grandmother, she was really, really awful lady. And I'm in the same category. I love Leave It to Beaver. I love the Donna Reed show. I love Father Knows Best. I wrote a book on it, but not adoring it, but trying to show how we were being groomed as the baby boomer for this new post-war economic system, the political system. So using that experience, we can apply a similar type of approach to understanding the Nickelodeon phenomenon. And that will require those young people who are watching this channel or who you will share it to, who grew up on Nickelodeon, to do the critical work on the Nickelodeon grooming process, just like I did work on the network television grooming process. All right. And also, I'm making an appeal to those who grew up with video games. I think you have a lot to offer the world in bringing us into what World of Warcraft is all about. I certainly don't know. I never got beyond Space Invaders or Pong. I wasn't interested in video games by that point, but you grew up in it. So anyway, there's a lot of work that remains to be done. And part of my function here doing this work is to motivate you to do this and to identify areas of study that will bring the generations together in a common effort to get out of our mental slavery, our behavioral bondage, corporate manufactured mythos, as I put in my title. And why am I calling it this? Well, I've done a talk on the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. If you go back in the playlist, which it'll be hard to find because I'm being suppressed here on TubeU, but it's there. You will see my review of the book by Alston Chase called Harvard and the Unabomber. And it's about a professor of psychology at Harvard by the name of Charles Murray. Is it Charles? It's not Charles. I'm sorry. I always get his name. No matter how much I hear it, I always get his name wrong. Henry Murray. And I found this book online not too long ago. It was published back in 1960. It's an anthology. He writes the introductory essay and the summary essay, Myth and Myth Making. published in 1960. Thank you, my patron supporters, for allowing me the funds to buy these precious books that are out of print. 1960. And he was talking about the centrality of mythos in all societies, from the tribal level to advanced post-industrial societies of the present. And he was writing this back in the 1960s. And it has all the big names in this anthology, 1960. Marshall McLuhan, Joseph Campbell, Myth with a Hero with a Thousand Faces, right? You know the guy from USC, George Lucas. He read that book. They all read the book about mythology, the hero with the... And they said, oh, great, that's Star Wars. I think I'll rip off Kurosawa Akira, Shichinin no Samurai, otherwise known as Seven Samurai. And I'll make it into a space opera called Star Wars. And I'll make a sequel. And I'll sell toys. And I'll get rich. And then I'll take a cash offer from Disney. That's George Lucas, the University of Spoiled Children, USC. That's probably why John M. Cho went there. Is it Chu? The guy from Palo Alto who directed Wicked, because of the George Lucas connection. And gosh, a number of directors. It was in the late 60s where they all started coming out in droves, either USC or UCLA. You got Francis Ford Coppola from UCLA. I think Walter Murch. There was also people coming out of NYU. Those are the three big schools. But they all knew about mythos. Anyway, let me finish my thought. Henry Murray, who was featured in the book, Harvard and the Unabomber, the making of the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, who blew up a bunch of people with these letter bombs that he was sending to certain targets, specific targets. One of them was right here in my town in Sacramento. In fact, he used to come to the original Tower bookstore there and read the magazines for free. I used to be there all the time as well, reading all the magazines for free. And that Tower bookstore also had a really good section on conspiracies. And this is before the days of Amazon. So I would buy everything from that section as well. Well, anyway, Henry Murray ran this longitudinal experiment with exceptionally bright, gifted intellectually people like Ted Kaczynski, who was 16 years old. As a mathematical genius, as a freshman, he recruited him to his longitudinal program. It was a Manchurian Candidate program. That's the same Henry Murray. And he's writing intelligently about myth making and manufacturing mythos to control the civilian as well. He started in the military. He was OSS. He was intelligence, right? Common pattern. So how can we apply this to the civilian population? That's Henry A. Murray. Thank you, Alston Chase, for breaking it down, that book. Everybody should read that book instead of just saying, oh, it's MK Ultra. Oh, it's Manchurian Candidate, right? Stop. It doesn't make you sound intelligent. It makes you sound like a newbie if you just keep name checking the same sources, right? Or you mention the same books. It's now time to start digging deeper and going into the source material, right? You're not going to be the next Ian Carroll, who did a little bit of background in your reading, and he got a lot of financial support to buy a bunch of subscribers. And 2 years later, all of a sudden, he's a pundit. It takes a lot more work than that. I know TubeU is expert in bringing people, pushing them forward to position them in that fashion. I'm here to tell you that this is a lifelong pursuit. That doesn't make me better than you, more superior. All it does is qualify me to speak to these issues at a very basic level. All right, so that's Henry Murray. I don't know if you'll be able to find this book online anymore. It's still in very good shape. Whoever owned it before me didn't really even crack. It's not even, the spine is not even cracked, which is fine with me. Beacon Publishers. Yeah, you'll also have to look at the publishers. This is like you look at Nickelodeon And institutionally, you also have to look at the institutional origins, the history of the publishing firms like Beacon. They're based out of Boston, and they have some sort of intelligence connection. I'm pretty much guaranteed, given the type of books they published in the past. Right? And I know them because of my work. I pick it up through osmosis. I observe this. I'm assimilating it. Okay. Now the second big point, I'm already running out of time. I haven't really even showed you any videos, which is okay because most of you know Jeanette McCurdy. She was saturating the media environment. So if I don't happen to show any videos, just go ahead and do it on your own. But just ignore everything that the gossip mongers are saying on TubeView. Okay, the other point I'm making is that children's TV, that phrase, it's a misnomer. I purposely put it in the title here to throw off the TubeView censors and the people who try to troll me. So I use their verbiage, children's TV. It's not children's TV. It's adults TV. Using children, using them as bait, using them as exploitable commodities. Yes, they're used to stoke consumer demand, whether it's Nestle's Quick chocolate, Ariana Grande, and Jeanette McCurdy were in a commercial together. I think it's Nestle's Quick. I had it here, but there were some sound problems. You can find it on your own. They were shilling for all kinds of products that are bad for you. Her mother was right about that. Most of what you're eating is toxic. But to the point of anorexia nervosa, followed by bulimia, which is a problem that Jeanette McCurdy suffered for much of her early life, then that goes too far, right? But it can be overcome. And one approach, by the way, this is something, that I'm just throwing out right now. I'll come back to it later, perhaps. But I started reading about the engram, ENGRM, and I started thinking about Jeanette McCurdy's roles that she was cast into as a child. She was cast as a victim of rape, child rape. She played I can't read my own handwriting. I had a bunch of notes here. All sorts of victims. Like when she's, as young as 6, 7, 8, 9, up to, I think she was as late as 18 years old. She played the sister or played a child murderer. I can't read my writing. She played all these victims. Now she was being encoded with all these memories. Even though she was acting, she was absorbing them as engrams. Now, don't get it twisted. I'm not talking about Scientology. Scientology, as it does, stole this concept from the existing medical, psychiatric, psychology, behavioral science literature. But let me just read you. I'll post this, by the way, because I can't do it justice. I'll post this on my Patreon site so you can read it yourself or hand it to your children and grandchildren to do a research paper about it. And this, I think, has some definite use so far as overcoming personal problems and this is not prescriptive. I'm not saying this is therapeutic, but this is something that serious researchers need to look into. Not me, but people are serious. I'm just pointing it out to you. And this title is Heroes of the Engram. It's a survey. It's by some researchers at Program in Neuroscience and Mental Health at University of Toronto. Right, these are real places that those people are at. And here's the abstract engram, Heroes of the Engram. You look this up on your own too. This is your assignment. In 1904, Richard Semon, S-E-M-O-N, introduced the term engram to describe the neural substrate responsible for, or at least important in, storing and recalling memories. That is a memory trace. It goes on with the description, but that's in the abstract there. So my argument when reading this book about her experiences, that these memory traces were being encoded into her cerebral cortex. I don't know if I'm getting it correct anatomically, her frontal lobe. Her brain was encoding it and storing it. Maybe store is not the proper term for it. And this is why, and she talks about it in the book, why going through psychotherapy wasn't going to help. Because as predicted, she and McCurdy's aware of what's going on. She's a very perceptive individual. The psychotherapist who was based in Century City, that's a tip off there. You don't want to go to see no psychotherapist in Century City. That's where all the major entertainment law firms are, and the studio adjunct. It's incredible. I think it was built on the lot of 21st Century Fox or whatever. It is itself built on a burial ground of the bones of the people that were used in the earlier film in that Century City. So there's some bad mojo. She doesn't talk about this as my own take on it. But she finally, thank goodness, because I'm saying, girl, get out of that psychotherapist's office. You don't need to be there. And sure enough, she does ditch her because she realized that talking about her childhood, how miserable it is, and talk about her mommy issues wasn't going to get her nowhere. So she's ditching them. So I'm thinking, man, Jeanette McCurdy could benefit by reading some of this literature that's fairly new. It's old, but it's new again. Reading about the Engram and how these in women and gender studies are really big on trauma. They overuse that term. So I'll use that language, how these traumas are encoded and manifest themselves in behavior, right? That's a separate talk, right? And if you think I'm off on that, oh, it's just a bunch of TV shows, it's just a bunch of movies, it's just some videos, man, you're wrong. You're way off base. You're self-deluded, right? You might want to check this book out. It's called This Is What It Is Like. It's about what the music you love says about you. I said, great, it's about popular music. So I said, well, that's something I know popular music operates on this level of encoding thoughts, feelings, and behavior. It manifests itself in behavior. So sure enough, I'm reading it, and she's a professor at the Berklee School of Music. This is in Boston, right? It's considered to be the premier music school for pop and rock musicians, aspiring people. Even John Mayer went there for a while. He quit. He realized he wasn't going to learn anything there. And then he hooked up with the right management and says, we're going to make you into a sex star, John Mayer. And then they produce him as a command. I'm waiting for the memoirs of John Mayer. And of course, he got to sleep with all these celebrities on his way up to make him available for People magazines and TMZ. That's John Mayer. Am I saying he's a bad musician? Not at all. He's a really good blues player. But him and thousands of other people are good blues players, right? So what I find is she's at Berkeley, but guess what? She's a professor of neuroscience. So all of this material stuff has been going through this process of being put through neuroscientific vetting and experimentation, right? This is an article I want to see about Nickelodeon. I want to see how they test this material on young people, which is most of the audience. Most, not all. The other part of the audience, and I don't mean to stigmatize them, are probably dirty old men who like to look at children's bodies. And that's why I said that children's TV is a misnomer. It's adult TV. It's done strictly for the financial, economic, political benefit of the people who are involved in these programs, these networks, which are owned by larger corporations that offshore their money through various processes that we can talk about at another time. Or I have talked about moving money and operations offshore in other talks beyond this. So you can see how this all synthesizes, right? And the other group of adults that these shows are for are, I won't use the common parlance on this. I don't want this video to be taken down, but I think you know who I mean. These are the people who are all up in the gossip shows on TubeU right now, who we can't get enough talking about, but we're just spinning around in circles saying, oh, Dan Schneider did this, or Josh. We're basing our fascination with it on personalities. And as execrable as these individuals are, we're missing the underlying infrastructure that's keeping this system intact and moving it forward so that the next generation or the current generation will also be groomed. 20 years from now, we're going to be seeing what the agenda was in 2025. For example, we see the militant transgenders right now acting out in the streets of America, at your Tesla dealerships, or targeting certain people for death or assassination. Those people were programmed 20 years ago, mostly at the university. They have their equivalent, University of Portland, Evergreen State, University of Washington up there in the Northwest, right? Or here at Berkeley, Stanford. They had their equivalent of Charles A. Murray running these programs 20 years ago. Now, 20 years henceforth, they are now full-fledged adults acting out the engram that was imprinted on them. But you're going to say, "Oh yeah, I know. That's the plot of Manchurian Candidate, dude." Again, stop thinking in these tired out allegorical terms. Manchurian Candidate is an allegory that has had its day. I'd like to put that to rest. So is another example is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Oh, that's so Doc. Have you ever read that book? Have you even watched the original Manchurian Candidate? Any of these films? No, they become dead metaphors. They become dead allegories. And the danger in that is that it implies that the problem is no more. But it's very much in play right now, under our noses, right in front of our computer screens. Our children, our grandchildren, our maybe great-grandchildren are seeing this not on necessarily the computer screen, but on the iPhone. Why do you think the show was called iCarly? Right, the premise is about two tweeners who started their own YouTube channel. Yeah, I as an iPhone. It's cute. The ideographic part of it is integral to the concept and the programming. Let's call it that. I'll use that term because I think we all know what's involved there. And it's been going on early since the time of the moguls, through the network period, through the current transnational money laundering NATO United Nations circuit that is at the very top of these organizations, right? I don't know if the Nickelodeon Group falls in that description, but you can bet that the president of Nickelodeon, who's most likely a woman, is not the top of the pyramid. She's there making her high six figures plus bonuses, incentives to keep quiet. She's there strictly as window dressing to run interference to the FCC or some congressman who wants to get his picture in the papers, the online papers. Talk about dead metaphors, picture in the paper, or wants to be on TMZ or wants to be on Fox News, like Pam Bondi. He thinks Pam Bondi's getting too much play on Fox. So Congressman X says, yeah, we're going to go in on the Nickelodeon. We're going to launch an investigation on this. We're going to haul them into Congress and force them to testify. And then you have Ashton Kutcher up there standing before Congress saying, yes, child trafficking is definitely an issue. And you'll have Ariana Grande up there, Selena Gomez. Maybe they'll even trot out poor Justin Bieber. I think they should leave him alone until he recovers. And I think he will, because he's a smart guy. I can tell he has a lot of self-awareness, self-reflection, and self-consciousness about what he's trying to do. So we might see another recovery in the making there. All right. I was going to go into Viacom, Paramount Global, the mergers. There's all these different sell-offs, mergers, recombinations that Paramount/Nickelodeon has gone through. You can look that up on yourself, do your Grok or your Chat GPT or your Wikipedia, whatever it is, to see all this. But this is all to kind of smooth out the trail, so to speak, the institutional trail that eventually leads to Lucifer himself, right? We are seeing here the latter day. It actually started in the 19th century, the latter modernity, late modernity. We're seeing the manifestation of what one scholar, who is a Luciferian himself, by the way, he came up with the phrase Satanic feminism. And I reviewed this book previously. It's by a guy named Per Ferdinand. I don't know if that's real name. I think he believes in some sort of Nordic Odinism or Aryan pagan, quote unquote, religiosity. He wrote a book. It's quite good, actually, for in bad ways. I have a copy. According to my records, I bought it in 2022. I'm still going through it. The title is Satanic Feminism, and the subtitle is Lucifer as the Liberator of Women in 19th Century Culture. So what he's saying historically, and he does a really good job in providing the receipts on his claims, the empirical evidence for his argument, it holds water. What he's identifying that was going on, this satanic feminism in the 19th century passed through into the 20th century, especially after World War II. It picked up the 1950s through the 60s counterculture, and now it's its final stage in 21st century satanic feminism. And we're mistaking it simply as DEI or GLBTQ plus, and we're having a lot of yucks out of it. We're watching Joey Rogan. Oh yeah, that's so stupid, dude. DEI. We think we're so enlightened because we're watching a bunch of clowns who are former comedians mocking something that doesn't even exist anymore, but leaving out the larger dark power, which is the satanic feminism. Not metaphorically, but quite literally. And it's at the universities, because I gave a talk on the occultic satanic origins of the University of California. Phoebe Hearst was an occultist of the 19th century, early 20th century. She was not a Christian lady. She was not a Judaic person. She was not even a Muslim. She was in occultism. And she put a big imprint, not just money and funding, but a big intellectual imprint on the type of people that she recruited, including those who eventually funded the Luciferian Project Deluxe, called the Manhattan Project, sited on the campus of the University of California in Berkeley, California. And Philip K. Dick, by the way, was living in Berkeley, writing this all down, going to the library and recording all this and seeing how he could write some pulp fiction and transcode this into popular novels and short stories. And further south, in Stanford, you have Leland Stanford's wife, who was also an occultist, who started their university named after their dead son sacrificed. Right? Leland Stanford was the railroad magnate. He was the Elon Musk of his day. Right? Leland Stanford started their own institution, and it's remained cursed ever since then to the present. And one of the big areas of study, research, and money that's going on is, guess what? Neuroscience. In fact, one of their presidents, not recently, he was a French-Canadian dude. I forgot his name. He had to resign because of plagiarism. And he was a neuroscientist. By the way, he was busted by an undergraduate who wrote an article for the school paper. So I'm telling you, it's the young people who are being subjected to this, who have some sort of self-consciousness, who haven't totally been steeped into the Nickelodeon mindset, that are going to be able to bring back their childhood experiences into a fashion that helps us understand the depth of control that's being imposed on America and in the world in the guise of benevolence via the technocracy. And you know Elon Musk's family background, and you know who he is right now, and all the other forms of liberation, pseudo-liberation that we fall for time and time again. I was in a major show, a chat room, looking at it, and there was this guy on the show promoting Sun Yun, which I knew from my own reading was a tool of Falun Gong, which has intelligence connections. And I know about the use of cultural organizations for propaganda purposes and compromise operations. South Korea did that. The Moonies, Reverend Sun Myung Park. I've seen this show before, but it's been run again. So he was on the show, and I said, I put this in the comments here, and some dick says, oh, we've got a CCP simp in the chat room, because this guy was talking about how awful communist China is, red Chi-coms, how badly, and maybe they are, and they probably are. It's a state, right? It's a huge authoritarian state. So I'm not defending them. But we tend to think, well, since they're bad, then everything else that supposedly is against it, like Sun Yun or the Epoch Times or Falun Gong, Falun Dafa, that by necessity, they're good. So you have to break that sort of binary thinking, that simplistic reductionism that we fall prey to it. I do as well. But every time I come to a conclusion, that's where I said, well, now it's time to really do the work, because I don't trust that this is the definitive answer. So I just keep pushing. And this is what you will have to do. This is what all of us, myself included, have to do if we have a hope of not being ensnared in the next scheme that's being promoted to us by the same group of people who worship the same entity. And I've already spoken his name, said his name once or twice before. I don't want to wear it out. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I went through the whole program without showing you Jeanette McCurdy. So look at it yourself. You can look up Dan Schneider, look up Joss Whedon, and read up on them. Many of you have. I saw in the chat room someone came up, oh yeah, the Nickelodeon thing. Like, you know anything about it? And the guy started making a bunch of comments, so I deleted him because I'm used to these people when I was teaching in classroom who were sitting in the back of the classroom and they thought they knew everything. So they'd interrupt me and they'd even try to upstage me. I've had teaching this. That's why I'm always down on these doctoral students, these graduate students, because they fall prey to the fact that they have a little knowledge and they know more than the professor. No, you're still in training. You're still a rank amateur. You are what they call a poo butt. I'm sorry that I'm using the obsolete lingo. That's just the first term that came to mind, right? So if you're a grad student and you're studying gender studies, queer studies, cultural studies, performance studies, anything with studies on it is a red flag. You're not going to get a job, all right? The university, the society has moved on. However, as I've already stated, there's a lot of opportunities for serious people to make a career out of examining our society, our culture, our systems. I happen to call it cultural forensics. You give it your name. The work is not completed. It sure as hell is not going to help you if you keep on that trajectory. You are on the path to extinction professionally. Same with you so-called anarchists, you black bloc people who are recruited at the university in the counseling center. You started out taking petitions out at the cafeteria, and then you got a bunch of signatures. So they brought you up to street captain. Then you got to be the head of the street team. And then you got to wear the mask and you got to recruit a bunch of other people. And then you've finally been led into doing some sort of DI or direct action on the Tesla dealerships. And they're getting you ready right now for the big spring offensive on the college and university campuses across the United States and through the UK. This is what's going to happen in the spring. But you being played, do you understand? You're being manipulated by the master of puppets. So stand down now while you can. Your faculty is not behind you. They are the most chicken shit people in the society you will ever encounter. The ones that are handling you are the TAs, teaching assistants or graduate assistants, or the postdoctoral people who are trying to get jobs by earning their bones by these street actions, or their union organizers. And there's a lot of yellows doing that. Most of them happen to be Filipino American, because they started getting the programming when their parents were in the Navy, in the military. They were getting the whole Ted Kaczynski treatment as the servitors of empire in the home country. And it came with America. So they're perfect for being these organizers. So if you ever hear it in their meetings, we're going to organize this, organizers, that's a code word for cannon fodder. They're going to put you up front to take the wooden bullets, the less than lethal munitions, the gas, the directed energy weapons. That's what you're going to be used for. And because I saw it so many times. I saw it at the University of California, Davis. I was there when they called out from off campus the jack-booted, helmeted people spraying the bear gas at the people who were playing revolution, who were guided into this scenario where they were going to be victimized, or running people like what's his name, the queer dude who's now supposedly straight. He's from Britain. He's not even an American. Milo Yiannopoulos, Or the guy that looked like Sammy Davis Jr. who said, "Stop the steal," right? Or these other characters who founded the Proud Gay Boys, right? These intelligence assets. Do you want to be a chump? I'm speaking directly to you who are gearing up for the spring offensive on campus. All right. What you can do is to invite all your professors to meet you out there on the quadrangle, or wherever it is, the central meeting area on your campus. And if none of them come with you, that means it's a setup. they're sacrificing you, and then they're going to go in the classroom saying, "Oh yeah, we staged a direct action against the administration, which is not doing enough to resist the encroaching tyranny of Donald Trump and Elon Musk." So don't be a sucker. That's my closing words for today. I know it's a long ways from Jeanette McCurdy and iCarly to the spring offensive, but it's behooves us to learn from these seemingly innocuous forms of programming as seen in Nickelodeon to the direct action, as they like to call it, that's coming to a movie theater, a campus near you. It's all theater. That's why they call it performance studies. It's all performativity. That's Judith Butler's bag, as in, oh, gender is just performed. There's no such thing as man and woman. It's just performativity. That, when the feces hits the fan at Berkeley, why don't you go get Judith Butler out of her office, her endowed chair, pull her out of her endowed chair, and take her to the Campanile Tower or wherever they're meeting these days to stage a direct action against the oppressive administration of the moment. All right. See if she comes. No, she'll be up in the Berkeley Hills enjoying a cappuccino. And she'll type something out like a message of solidarity. She'll sign a petition of the other Berkeley faculty saying, yes, we fully support the students on this. And then she'll go back to her cappuccino up in the Berkeley Hills. That's my time, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing to indulge my rational faculties. Thank you for joining me. My Patreon people, I will post some of these articles there for your more in-depth reading. All right. Until then, peace. I'll be back with you Sunday, God willing. Bye.